It's longer than I thought. Okay, so I'm ready.
Oh, yeah, longer than I thought. It didn't seem that long at all.
So I'm ready for the next one whenever you are.
Okay, so Forrest Whitaker. So in that Forrest article, you wrote about how you appealed to the federal court over the IRS's decision to reject his request for installment payments. So can you kind of break it down about what happened and how this led to what it became?
Sure. I think everyone reads about celebrities and you know see some very big numbers for people in the entertainment business, how much money they make, how much income they have, and Forrest Whitaker has been very successful. He has had a sort of string of tax disputes over the years, and this one I would characterize as especially unfortunate. And I think it has some lessons for all of us about communication and about sort of how you deal with the IRS, which is carefully and methodically, and make sure you keep them informed. When they ask you for things, make sure that you are supplying them, because this was really all about not how much tax he should pay, but based on his own calculations, when he should pay it and how he could have, in my view, gotten more time if he needed it.
So what should he have done differently? Do you want to just talk? I know it's a long story, but briefly what happened to him and what he should have done differently to avoid the whole mess.
Sure. I think what he should have done differently, and I think his advisors, for the way I read it anyway, maybe misled him a bit. So he had relatively high income from his own company, but was not taking out payroll taxes. He was taking out a tiny, tiny percentage of the taxes that clearly he owed as an employee of his own company. And so it led to many hundreds of thousands of dollars of shortfall. The IRS got wind of this when basically he filed his own tax return saying that he owed a lot of money, and then his advisor started communicating with the IRS saying he couldn't pay it right away. He wanted time to pay in installments. And there's kind of a sort of rigid order of things that you go through with the IRS. Normally, it's not that hard to get extra time, but when the IRS asks for things, generally you got to give it to them. So things like, can we have a financial statement? Can you make sure that you file your tax return, your next one that's due? Can you propose something that takes into account how much you owe and that stays current on current payments? I think what unfortunately was the sort of the big straw that broke the camel's back here was that the IRS found out that his problems were spiraling in a sort of in a negative direction. He, instead of starting to withhold more taxes in the next year, he was doing the same thing or worse. And I think that's when things very clearly meant that the IRS was not going to give him more time and that he had to change his current withholding. It was as simple as that. And ultimately, the IRS said no to a payment plan, which doesn't happen all that frequently in my experience. And then he started going to court, which probably was a waste of time in my view, going to court saying that the IRS was unreasonable in denying his request for installments. And then, to make matters worse, after he loses in court, he goes on appeal to make the same arguments. And I think, again, I'm just giving you my personal opinion, but I think it was pretty clear from the beginning that these were really tough arguments to make given sort of how his advisor's communication with the IRS went, and that it was clear that had it been handled more carefully at the beginning, he probably would not have spent all that money chasing the IRS on something that he probably couldn't win.
Okay, as you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, what are some lessons learned from Whitaker's case?
I think lessons learned are be realistic in what you're asking, and that's not to say that you can't disagree with the IRS. That's what you know. That's what many people do. That's what tax lawyers and accountants do, sort of as a matter of course. But I think on something that is a payment obligation, where you're not disputing the amount that you owe, and the only question is how to pay over time. There's so much that you have to do in order to get what you want, and I think that's what went wrong here. Somehow those discussions did not occur between Mr. Whitaker and his advisor, I'm guessing, or if they did, it certainly wasn't handled the way it should have been in terms of communication with the IRS. It's sort of, to me, that's the big lesson, is this is about communication and about knowing what you have to do to get the deal you want, and that's what went wrong here.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, you want to just keep staring in the camera
Sorry.
like we did with the other one?
Yep. Just tell me when to stop.
Okay, I will. Okay, that should be good.
Okay.